Lee Trevino's Fighting Golf. Never before in a home format have so many options been available to a player of video golf. And welcome to Nostalgia, chronological exploration of every NES game released in North America. I'm Mike.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Joe.
And guys, that quote that we read at the beginning of the episode is brought to you by the U.S. National Video Game Team of 1988.
Is that like an Olympic team?
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
I had a feeling that nobody would know who the U.S. National Video Game Team is, so I did some research because I had never heard of them either. And it was set up by Walter Day back in 1983. Do you guys know Walter Day? He's that guy who wears the referee shirt in King of Kong.
I must have seen him, but I don't recall.
He's like the owner of Twin Galaxies too, or something of that effect. And Twin Galaxies are the people that used to hold like all the world records for the arcade games. Anyway, make a long story short, Walter Day set up a team that involved like Billy Mitchell and Todd Rogers, two people that are now like banned from video game achievements for life because they both got caught cheating. And they toured the U.S. in like a bus, going around beating people at different video game arcades throughout America. And then eventually went all the way to going to foreign embassies and beating international video game players as well.
Okay. I like that, like when you just say beating, it sounds like they went in a tour bus just beating crowds of people in arcades. But now when you say embassies, now that I'm confused because like what foreign embassy would allow such a thing to occur? Did they actually care about video games back then on the international stage?
And was this was this just like a thing that they did, or were there other like teams that they were fighting against that were also trying to do this? Or were they just like, challengers, let us know and we'll find you and fight you? So were they just doing this on their own, or were there other teams that they could go out and... Were they just like, any challengers, let us know and we'll come fight you, or were there rival factions?
I don't think there were any rival factions, but that's something I guess I should look up. You know, there's not a lot of information on how they did any of this. It does seem like they took it upon themselves to name themselves the U.S. National Video Game Team and then just showed up at random arcades around the United States and said, bet I could beat you in Pac-Man, and they played a guy who had memorized Pac-Man.
So it's just a bunch of kids like making a club and just doing things.
Kids would be the wrong word. You know,
sure,
we're looking at
kids.
like 20s.
Is this a legal organization?
Apparently so. Apparently yes. And they're even to this day they're still active. You can look up their current members on their website, usnationalvideogameteam.com.
Okay. It's actually a Zanga. But anyway, right. Continue, Mike.
Yeah, anyway, remember golf on the NES?
Oh, you mean one of your favorite games of all time, golf?
We all loved golf. Joe, didn't you love golf?
I loved golf. I did love golf. Not as much as you, granted, but I did like golf.
And now we have Lee Trevino's Fighting Golf, which is not a beat 'em up, and it's also not a it's not a fighter either. It is just golf again.
And Lee Trevino is not in it.
Well,
no,
he's in it. He's in it. Make no mistake about it.
He's in it?
Yeah.
He's Super Mex.
He's Super Mex. See, it's funny because...
Oh, I didn't know that.
When I saw this game on the list, I had to do some digging just to understand why it's named the way it is. And like I learned that Lee Trevino was, he was the equivalent of like a sort of like a Tiger Woods of the time. And... that doesn't stop me though from sort of fantasizing about this game as if it were something along the lines of like Sean Avery's 3D hockey. Like it just seems so like a pedestrian name to be attached to a game series. I don't know if this has another one, but I don't know what you guys thought.
Well, did you find a reason that it's fighting golf?
I don't know why it's called fighting golf. I thought maybe Lee Trevino had a temper, but that's just a guess.
Yeah, because I was waiting for that. I was like, oh, this is going to be cool. There's going to be like a little twist where you have to go like on a mission and fight people or something. But nope, it's just golf.
Well, there is actually an explanation for both things. I'll talk about both points. So first, for the fighting golf, that's actually just strictly a mistranslation by the localization team, where they just didn't understand the title of the Japanese game and included fighting, thinking that like, oh yeah, that's an action-y word. That'll make sense.
I kind of figured it was like maybe it was supposed to be like versus or something because there's 2-player in it or something. It was mistranslated to fighting, but I didn't know.
Yeah, and then Sean, just to go back to your thing, because I think Sean Avery's 3D hockey is very funny. It's true that like that would even be a thing that would go on to happen, at least in baseball games, where like Nintendo got like Ken Griffey's license, and that was like incredible for the time. And so anybody else who wanted, right? No, but that's what I'm saying. Like anybody else who wanted to make a baseball game had to use a different player. And so that's kind of like a real life example of like, why would I play Mike Piazza's Strike Zone when Ken Griffey Jr.'s Slug Out is happening?
So wait, Mike Piazza's Strike Zone is a game.
It's a game on the N64, and it's awful.
Okay.
Also, since we're talking about Lee Trevino's fighting golf and Lee Trevino in general here, why would Lee Trevino opt himself to be in a game where he's the second most powerful golfer and has the second worst control out of all of the golfers?
I think it's...
I feel like he probably had no idea what they were going to do to his likeness.
I think that maybe he just wants to be seen as the all-rounder. And, you know, because the people that he's... the other characters in this game, if we want to go there, is... A girl that is just defined by how pretty she is, and she's more accurate. And then there's another dude that is just strong, and maybe he never even played golf before.
Oh, you're talking about Big Jumbo?
Big Jumbo. And I forgot who the other one is, but I don't remember why
Miracle Chasuke.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe he just wanted to be seen as like the only true golfer on the roster.
Right, and Lee Trevino is Super Mex, the third option on the character screen, because that was his nickname, was Super Mex, and I think that, like, I'm sure there's a perfectly valid explanation for that, but the only reason I could find is that he was a Mexican-American golf player, so
yeah.
they just naturally called him that.
I guess that is true, like, even on the infallible Wikipedia page, they said that he was affectionately called Super Mex.
But it's important to mention that there are characters here because I think that's like a big differentiator right off the bat from like NES golf, in the case that like each of these characters, even if they are no-name people outside of Lee Trevino, they each control differently. You have Pretty Amy, who has the least amount of power but the best control. And yeah, it's weird that like her whole personality is like defined by her being pretty. But what's up with like what's up with the fact that if she hits like a great shot, you also get you get to see her panties.
Yeah, it's weird.
Like, what's that about?
It's very Japanese.
And then you have Big Jumbo, who, as you can imagine, has the most power, but sucks at everything else. So you have to like work with that against you. Super Mex, like I said, he's just an all-around average golfer, which just seems strange for Lee Trevino to want to attach his name to.
It sounds better if you just say he's an all-round golfer.
Oh, there you go. Got it. All-around golfer. And Miracle Chasuke, who I'm sure I'm not saying that last name right, but his whole thing is that he can do the miracle putt, which is like he has a better opportunity of like if you're using like a sand wedge or a power wedge, and you're not on the green, you have a better opportunity of hitting it into the hole than anybody else.
So you're saying there's like RNG in this game?
I'm saying that there's a lot of RNG just off the bat based on those introductions. I mean, now you have to choose between like, forget about understanding the controls of a golf game in 2 dimensions, right? Like, forget about those things for a second and understand that now, no matter who you pick, you're penalized in some way.
Maybe that's why it makes sense that Lee Trevino is the all-rounder, because that's who, like, most people who are going to play are just going to probably feel more comfortable playing with him, because it's like, well, he's pretty good at everything, even though he's not the best.
And I also just disagree with the notion that these are, like, that your experience is lesser because there is like a variety of kinds of characters. I mean, I think it's just in how you frame it. Like, yeah, I mean, I think unless it's just going to be a completely cosmetic difference between what character you choose, like there should be pros and cons to choosing them.
Yeah, I agree with that. It didn't bother me that they had different attributes. Granted, I really mostly just played as Super Mechs.
So yeah, I just feel like golf is already kind of complicated on the NES. Like there's a lot working against it, and the idea that like there's randomness to your player character only makes it harder to actually be any good at this game.
The only randomness that I can see in just the descriptions of these characters, though, is apparently that Miracle Chaisuke guy could get miracle putts. Everything else is just you see it reflected on their UI. Like if you're playing as Lee Trevino, like everything behaves in one way, but if you're playing as Amy, that little power / accuracy gauge goes a little slower. So they're more like the tools afforded to you behave differently, and I don't really see the RNG in it.
So I'm not. I guess I'm not talking about RNG in the sense of like that the computer actually programs randomness. What I'm saying is that there are accurate. There's measures of how hard each player can hit a ball, and so obviously, like Big Jumbo could hit something 275 yards, where Pretty Amy can only hit it 225. But Pretty Amy has better control over the ball, and that matters about like how the ball lands. Versus like if you're Big Jumbo, even if you hit it right on the middle, there's going to be some kind of slice for the ball that's going to cause it to wane left or right on any given particular putt.
Okay, I didn't play as him, so maybe that is the case. But I thought it was just that it was more sensitive to your input, not so much that it would add randomness to your input.
Right. No, it adds that, but on top of that too, it's like each thing has their own thing too. Like Miracle Chaisuke, his putting is great, but it comes at the cost of control and power. And Pretty Amy is she has the least amount of power, but her putting isn't as good as Miracle Chaisuke. So it's like, it's interesting that they gave these characters a thing. I guess I'm arguing that on an NES golf game, do we really need another layer of complications on top of the things that we've already experienced and the new additions that this game brings to it?
I see what you're saying, but I do think that after playing it for a little bit, like I think it's overall a good thing, at least in my opinion, also to have. Granted, if there's anything that's like actually like punishing about picking a character, that might not be the best. But I think the fact that it's like just some characters have better attributes and better skills in one attribute than another character, I like that too because it adds a little bit of level of like strategy and choice to it.
Cool. So let's talk about the notable differences for this game, because it's not just the NES golf mechanics with playable characters and franchising behind it. There are actually some new mechanics introduced in this one. And if we could just kind of talk our way through each of them, I'll introduce the subjects. The first one I thought was interesting is that where you are on the course at any given particular time, the computer will auto-pick a club and direction for you that it thinks is appropriate. Did you guys find that more helpful than just always having to pick your own wedge or iron?
Yeah, I actually very rarely ended up finding myself switching it. Once in a while I did, but for the most part, I just kind of trusted what the computer gave me, and usually, I mean, obviously I don't know what would have happened if I switched it, but usually it felt like the computer gave me the right choice.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I liked it because I'm not super familiar with golf clubs, and, I didn't have to, like, think about it or, like, remember which was which or which one would be good in which position, but I'm sure after a while it might get like a little bit too easy.
I think this is the natural progression. Like, I wouldn't say that they were trailblazers for doing this, but there's a reason that golf games to this day will sort of do that for you. And part of it is because a layperson doesn't know the difference between a 9-iron and a 5-wood. Like, I don't. So when I was just sort of trying, like, blindly looking at all of my clubs and deciding what to do in the original NES Golf, like, I just sort of had to, like, just guess what these things meant. And I appreciate that it at least, like, guides you to where you should be, and then you can adjust it from there. Like, there were some instances where I went from a 9-iron to the actual, like, driver, and just to get some extra oomph to it. But I think that this was the next logical step.
Yeah, I think a nice compromise for me would have been if there was like an easy mode that selects your clubs for you, but still displays them, so you can play that for a while, kind of learn the clubs, and then like a regular or hard mode where it's like now.
Yeah, I guess that worked.
Yeah, and it's not always the best too, which is important too, because I think it would stink if like it always chose the optimal thing for you given a situation. Like, it doesn't account for the wind, or it doesn't account for like, oh, there might be a lake hazard in the middle of this, and now you might land in there instead if you don't change your club. Like, I like that, because if it just chose you the optimal thing based on computer metrics, you'd be barely playing the game. You would just always swing as hard as possible and aim for the middle.
Mm-hmm.
I also think
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I also think that the ability to like to keep the clubs within the same amount that the NES golf game had wasn't a like hindrance for it, because I'm pretty sure that's just the standard amount of clubs that anyone brings with them to an 18-hole course. So that wasn't weird to me, and at the same time, like, I don't even know if I needed all of those options. Like, it's really nice for them to include everything from a 1-wood to a sand wedge, but I don't even know if I need all 3-iron to 9-iron for me.
I think it's just, I guess it would be sort of like I don't even know what an equivalent would be, but it's like in a baseball game, you could only do a fastball or something. I don't know. I think that
exactly
the different kinds of clubs are very descriptive of the sport, so you need them, I think.
Yeah, although it is, I do wonder, like, how much like those small increments actually do within like the hardware of the NES. Like, maybe they don't make too much of a difference, but they're just there for immersion. I'm not sure, but it just seems like how much can the NES be really differentiating between?
I think
like,
it's just
clubs that are so close
I think
together?
It's just differences in range and maybe how sensitive it is to changes in power. I don't know. That's just a guess.
No, I think you're spot on there, because it seems like, for the most part, each club is, and it is regardless of player, because even if your max is 275 or your max is 245, it seems to go down in increments of like 30s and then 10s and then maybe even as low as 5s towards the end.
Yeah.
So it seems like it was nice of them to like not say like, oh, well, you really only need a 1-wood, a 4-wood, a 1-iron, a 5-iron, and a 9-iron. You know, like that.
Yeah.
It's nice to include everything.
And then the wedges are there for the special instances in which you've gotten yourself into trouble.
Yep, and there's more movement on the ball than ever, too, because you can now use your D-pad to do like high and low hits and backspins. Did you guys try any of that stuff?
I tried backspin a little bit, but it was tough because it's like it seems like it's a very precise timing. I didn't really try too much else though.
I wasn't very good at it, so I don't think I ever actually pulled it off, but I appreciate that it at least has a little bit more realism in this game than in modern golf games, where you have this magical ability to alter the course of your ball in mid-flight, and like that's where you add your spin as while the ball is in the air, which doesn't really make sense to me. I don't know if you guys have played more recent golf games, but it at least was trying to simulate that aspect of the sport.
The only person who was ever able to control their golf ball in midair was Michael Jordan in Space Jam.
Exactly.
I will echo what Joe was saying there, that it might just be too many movements to do a backspin. It's just a little complicated because you have to time it appropriately after your movement with the rest of the power gauges. So you have to like perform everything that you need to do, and then also think about like using the right or left D-pad to put a little swerve on it right before you tee off, but you haven't, you've already hit A twice, so it's like A, left, A, and I just think that's like, for me, that's too much to think about in golf right now on this platform.
It's actually, that's where the
it's
fighting
a lot
comes
to think
from.
about within like 1 second.
That's where the fighting comes from, because it actually
it's a
has
combo.
they have to do combos to get the ball anywhere.
But high and low work really well because those are just holding the up or down on your D-pad, depending on if you want to hit the ball high or if you want to hit it low. And it only has one effect, which is just that if you hit the ball high, the wind accounts for more effect. So if you want the wind to like, screw up your ball a little more, if it's going like 10 miles per hour north and you want to make sure you carry your ball, you want to hit high. Whereas like if you don't want to be affected by the wind but don't care about shooting like very far, then you want to shoot low to make sure that you get the most accurate possible hit. So I mean, those are great inclusions that were definitely not on NES Golf, so that's cool.
Indubitably.
And while we're talking about the D-pad, the left and right don't do anything while you're shooting, correct?
I don't know.
It's only...
I think that...
I'm pretty sure it's just up and down while you're shooting.
Is that
and then
how
if you
you
press
apply...
B...
Is that how you apply, like, hook? Or is that just... You do hook via where you do that second A press?
Where you do
I
that
thought
second
hook was
A
where
press.
that second A press... Yeah. So I know this is like such a tiny pet peeve, but I was like a little annoyed that I had to, every time I wanted to, rotate my player at all, you have to press B to like activate the ability to rotate, even though the buttons you use to rotate are not doing anything beforehand. Like there was no need for that. So then you have to press B to activate that ability, then press B to select club, and then press B again to go back to swinging. And I know that's like a tiny thing, but it got annoying to me after a while. I kept forgetting, like, wait, am I swinging now? Am I selecting my club? I feel like it should have just been B to select your club, and that's the only... You don't need to have, like, an alternative control scheme just so you could turn left and right if you have these two buttons that are not doing anything otherwise.
Sure, I guess I agree with that. It didn't bother me as much, but if it can be achieved and simplified, then why not?
Yeah, I feel like maybe, or then if you're going to have this other thing, which wouldn't be that big of a deal, if left and right were doing anything in the first control scheme. I hope I'm saying this in a clear enough way that the listeners know what I'm talking about. If you haven't played it, but it's just,
I guess we could.
It's just a little weird that you have to go to like another page of controls.
I guess like we could just very briefly like explain. So there are three modes that you're going to cycle through. The first is you have a little cursor that shows the direction you're facing, and you can adjust that with left and right, and also sort of extrapolate distance from that point by pressing up and down. And then if you press A or press B again, it'll move you to your club selection. If you press B again, it gets you to where you can actually take your swing, and that's just the power gauge. And the second press of that power gauge determines how much hook or push, I guess, you have on the swing. So what Joe is trying to describe is like there's a little too much division in how all those things control, because that same power gauge selection could also handle turning left or right. Is that pretty clear?
Yeah, exactly. Like it's like they could be in the same screen. You shouldn't have to switch to a new control scheme, because it just adds like a weird layer of complication that it's sort of immersion breaking a little bit. I know that I'm like overly annoyed with this like tiny little thing, but I just felt like after a while I was just like, why is it making me do this every time?
Well, it's important to note too that you start on the assumption that you're swinging. So every time that you do want to move, even just the tiniest bit, rotate in a particular direction, you need to press the B button at least 3 times to get through your entire rotation. So it'd be one thing if it asked you first, where do you want to face before that? Because that would be like one way to achieve it. So this way you only have to do one B press, but you're going to wind up doing the B button press 3 times before you're able to go back to your swinging.
Right, and before I didn't read the manual right off the bat. I had to go back into it, but like at first I wasn't even sure how to turn, because the the D-pad wasn't doing anything to make me turn, which then I just felt like, why doesn't it just let me turn now? But so I had to go in and read the manual and realize that you can like switch to another control.
Yeah, the only thing I could think of is that you were asking if the left and right D-pad do anything, and it only happens when you're in the middle of applying your swing, where you can apply the backspin. But that doesn't mean that you couldn't use the left and right beforehand. But maybe it was locking it off just so this way it was always triggered for backspin or something like that. That you couldn't apply two different sets of controls for the same recognition.
Maybe, yeah.
And then the last notable addition that I wanted to talk about is a practice mode. This was something that we all had a gripe about in NES Golf because there was no way to practice the later holes. You just had to remember them and be like, oh yeah, I'm okay at this one, if you assume that you could get all the way to the 17th hole again in NES Golf. So in this one, you're able to practice a particular hole that's bugging you, and you can also practice better with all the characters too to better understand how they work. And so I think this just makes so much sense, and it feels weird that we're praising a practice mode here, but we don't have a lot of games that let you practice much of anything.
Yeah, and I think it was needed a lot more here because, like you said, there are these 4 different characters that you want to be able to play around with and see who you're good with and who whose control schemes you like.
One thing I wanted to mention was in the I guess the campaign mode, for lack of a better word, I guess. I liked the additions of holes that had little mini objectives on them, like the farthest drive and closest pin. And you'd get a trophy for that even while you're just going through a normal 9 holes. So I guess little tidbits like that were also a good improvement. I thought added some flavor to it.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be something there. I don't watch golf if it's not clear, but there's got to be something there because that's even a mechanic in Mario Golf on the N64, where certain holes would just be like, who's got the longest drive? And then you would get a trophy for that too. So that must be like a thing in golf.
But I don't actually know.
I liked that inclusion.
Is that what Nassau is?
That's the Nassau mode,
yeah.
Yes.
It's like the Nassau Classic or something. I don't know.
Yeah, isn't that what that is? I know that's like betting on 3 different things, but is that like actually betting on specific? Isn't that what that is? Isn't that like?
Yeah, it's a wager. It's a wager in golf. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I don't really know too much more about it, but I think it's like you bet on like the first half of the game, and you bet on the first 9 holes in the back 9, and then like something else.
Interesting. Yeah, I took it as you're gonna go and play the whole course versus a computer or somebody else. So I didn't know.
It's money, but in this game, obviously, there's no money, so it's just wagered on the best score of each of the front 9, back 9 for the total of 18 holes. So it's the same thing as like what I think NES Golf called match play, where you just basically get appropriate points based on a particular hole, not in terms of strokes. So there's no difference if one guy gets like -7 and the other guy, has +3, because it only counts like who won the most amount of holes. It's an individual type thing. And I think that's really cool. I think that's a neat way to get around being bad at particular holes.
Yeah, that makes sense. One thing I wanted to talk about was I appreciated the improved graphics in this game. Not that they are anything like special, but instead of just the bare bones like grass and sand and water of NES Golf, like there's actually some almost 3D elements in one of the window panes in this, where like the tree, like you see trees in the distance, and the trees that you actually interact with on the course. The character models are a bit more detailed, and they're not just weirdly realistically shaped Marios. So I thought that was also something that you could applaud.
Yeah, I thought it definitely looked like, there was like some shading or so, whatever you want to call it. It wasn't just solid colors. Yeah. But there was one thing about actually like the improved look that I actually think hurt it a little bit, unless I misinterpreted it. But in NES Golf, when you're on the green, there were like just little arrows that like kind of look like they're supposed to be part of the aesthetic, but they also serve to point as to like which way the slope is, like which way your ball will roll.
Well, that still exists
now
on the green.
It looks like, yeah, there's something there, but it's like there's like not always arrows. They're like weird designs. I can't even tell sometimes which way it's trying to point.
I guess I had a more I took to it a bit more naturally, because they do sort of they end up looking like arrows in some instances, and sometimes they're
in some instances, yeah. But then other instances they're just not. Like, and sometimes I'm like, okay, like this one line is like out further than the two next to it, so it looks like it's pointing that way. But then in other instances, I'm just like, well, what is this shape? So I just kind of guessed sometimes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I think what Joe's getting at there, which it's like a weird fault of the game here, where the NES one is being so straightforward about where the direction on the putt goes that it's just right angles. It's just here's it's heading left, it's heading right. This one does more design work, which to Sean's point is true. You'll be able to tell, but it's not inherently obvious.
Yeah, but it's also
that's the aesthetic that they were going for.
Yeah, it's a bit more realistic, even though no green has these weird patterns on them, but it's also telling you how steep the curve is, and there's like 8 directions it can go now instead of just 4. So I think with the information they were trying to get across, it wasn't perfectly clear, but I think it's something you can learn over time playing the game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the more you play it, the more you can pick up on it. I don't remember NES Golf only having 4 directions. Is that? Are we sure
maybe
on that?
That was false, but
yeah, I didn't. Yeah. I also didn't realize that this one had steeper. That's cool that it does have steeper things. But the thing that bothers me is I almost think it feels a little less realistic, because I feel like if I'm on a golf course, even though there are no arrows indicating, it's very clear to me where the slope is. Like, especially when you're on there. Whereas like here, I don't know. Maybe I have to play it again. Maybe I missed something. But here it felt like I was never 100% sure that I was right about which way the slope was going and how steep it was.
Huh.
The manual rightly assumes that most kids won't understand all of the rules of golf, and I think the manual does a great job here of covering a lot of weird instances that might seem like, oh, that's kind of unfair, but then you read the manual and say, oh, well, they did mention it, so I guess I don't have an excuse. And that's one of those things where it does say that, specifically on the putting green, the ball goes in the direction of the point of the mark. The bigger the mark, the more the ball is affected. And then even goes as far as to say that the influence of grass on the American course is stronger than on the Japanese course.
Interesting.
Damn right.
We have stronger grass over here.
American grass, yeah. I didn't read any of that, so that might also be where my issue comes in.
And since we're talking about the graphics, we might as well talk about the music, because this is our first golf game with music.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll let you know my first impression of it was it felt for some reason it was feeling very Johto region to me. It felt very Pokemon Gen 2.
Okay.
I don't know if anyone else got that, but this is what it was reminding me of.
Well, it does have it has a bit of a Game Boy sound to it. I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm listening to it right now. And yeah, it doesn't quite sound like an NES style of music, but it obviously is. That they can't change chips or anything. It just seems so distinctly, and maybe it's just the number of sound channels they're using, but it just seems so distinctively like upbeat and high use of chimes and everything like that. So I think that's really cool that you mentioned that.
Right. And you mentioned the number of sound channels, and I think that's part of the reason I think part of the reason where I'm making the connection is because the first generation of Pokemon I felt like was like much simpler music, and the second one got a little more complex. And I feel like this is like a little more complex than what we're used to hearing on the NES. So I think it's giving me like some nostalgia there.
Name drop.
Yeah, some nostalgia. I didn't even think of that.
And I don't want to go like too deep into the differences between like stroke play and Nassau mode, as if they're like, as if like, oh, like we have to get into the nitty gritty of these. But with stroke play being solo and Nassau finally giving players the ability to verse computers where NES Golf didn't, I thought it was fun to play against computers, but they're pretty good at the game.
Okay, so I had a situation where I played as Lee Trevino and Super
Mechs,
and then it randomly chose Pretty Amy, and I wasn't doing too great, but I was holding my own, and I wouldn't have won a hole unless the AI for Amy actually I thought like was actually trying to rebel against me, because I got pretty lucky on, I forgot which hole it was, and I birdied it, and so Amy comes up on the green and she overshoots it, and now she's in the very rough or the super rough. I don't know what kind of rough it was, and so she's trying to get out, and then she doesn't hit the green again, and it's her stroke again, and then she just starts rotating away from the hole further into the rough.
That exact thing happened to me, but it wasn't Pretty Amy.
It's almost as if like the computer assumes that the hole is in a different spot, because the computer did this 17 times before it finally randomly got in the hole. Right. Or like 15, something along those lines, before it finally got in the hole by what I assume was black magic, because it was off of the roughest part of the course possible, and it was just like a straight shot into the hole. So I don't know what was going on with the AI in this. I don't know if I put it into some almost infinite loop, but the fact that it happened to you too is insane to me.
I think there's some like rule in the AI that is like broken there, where it's like, oh, it's always going to aim for like the easiest way to get to, I don't know, this situation, but like it's not taking into account this one spot where like the hole is not in that situation. to bring another Pokemon reference in Gen 1 of Pokemon, there was an AI glitch where there was a move that didn't work on one Pokemon, but the game's AI was like, oh, this is always strong against this type, and you could like break the game by like I think it was like you make Dragonite use Wrap over and over again or something. Okay. Like it's something like that, where it's like it won't attack you because it thinks that it's super effective because the AI is broken. And I feel like it's a situation like that. That'll be my last Pokemon reference of the day.
One other thing, since we're talking about these different modes and stuff like that, there were two courses that we briefly touched upon, some light differences, but there was the American course and the Japanese course. It pretty much auto-picks the American course where you have to choose to do the Japanese one, and I'm not sure how long you guys played this game, but did you give the Japanese course a run?
Yeah, I played the American course for the Nassau mode, and then once I was done with that, I played a few holes on just stroke play for the Japanese course, and I like the differences between them. Like one is much more wide open, but also like has different ratios of the kind of obstacles that you'll find. Whereas like the Japanese course is much more like it's more of an archipelago as Japan is. So I like the differences.
Yeah, it felt like they had actually modeled after like a particular course in each of the countries, and even like the NES Golf gave us in this manual, we also get like an actual depiction of what each course looks like from like a satellite view, and I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, they look pretty realistic from the quality of this scan. I can't even tell if it's a photograph or not. So
right. And this was another thing I was going to bring up. I thought this was pretty interesting. Did you guys know that there is a press rule on the Nassau mode that like will probably never happen to anybody in this game, but it could possibly happen, and it's like this great rule, and it happens in real life too, where if a player is behind by 2 or more strokes and can't win, if you choose to press, you after the last hole, you declare the press, you win the hole, the score becomes tied, and then you go into like a final course,
like a playoff,
thing. It's like where did that rule sounds like it was just like scribbled in by somebody at the last
I read
minute.
about this. I didn't know that it was based on anything real, because that sort of makes the entire rest of the game seem like moot. Like if I can pull that far ahead of you, shouldn't I win? I don't know.
Well, you have to remember, in real life, money is involved. So it's like you're pretty much saying like double or nothing on your score for the very last hole.
So in real life, it would behoove you to not do this, because you'll probably lose more money.
Correct.
That far behind.
Okay. Right. You've already proven that you've like lost, and now you're like, actually, I want to lose more.
Unless you're a hustler.
That's right.
That's true. But that's just for billiards, right?
Right. For lunar pool only. Yeah, I had one thing I wanted to mention, and I'm sorry that it sounds like my thoughts on this game is just a collection of pet peeves, but I appreciate the immersion of having the computer player 2 really take their time to get their shot off. But I mean, it takes like 15 seconds where they're just like, they're not even adjusting. It's like they're just taking like a long deep breath before they shoot. And the first couple times they're like, oh, it's like real golf, and then on like the third time I'm like, okay, like let's play the game. I don't even take that long.
I found it annoying as well. That's it.
Yeah.
All right, so real quick, we'll go into the sequels and spin-offs here, and I think it's important to note that Lee Trevino would not show up in another golf game with his own namesake attached to it. So this is your only chance to get a Lee Trevino golf game. But
I'm just
if you
glad
want,
that it happened,
Right. If you want, there's always Lee Carvalho's putting challenge for Christmas. You could always get that instead. Of course, that's a Simpsons reference from the episode Marge Be Not Proud in season 7. And I'm sure everybody who's a Simpsons fan knows what I'm talking about. But apparently, Lee Carvalho's putting challenge is somehow making fun of Lee Trevino's fighting golf. I don't buy the connection, but there's some people trying to make it.
It's pretty obvious that that's what it's making fun of.
I mean, the idea that The Simpsons in season 7, which was 1996, would be talking about a game from 1988 is a little bit of a reach.
You know what? I don't agree with you. I think it's almost too obvious that it is making fun of this game, in the same way that I remember you mentioned in a prior episode that about Karnov, that you thought there's no way that Karnov isn't in Shantae, and it looks so obvious to me that he is. So, Mike, I think you're just a little too suspicious.
I understand now. I'm going to try to think about this tonight, but I've watched The Simpsons for a very long time, and I'm going to say that they didn't make the connection.
I'm going to.
I like how you're not even like going to think about this tonight. You're going to try to think about it. It's like the biggest I'm not really going to give this the time.
You're like some typical like globist that thinks that there were once forests.
That's true. Or that the trees are just like, the feet of giants.
They were.
Yeah. Or was that the mountains? There was something about mountains were like something for flat earthers. I don't remember. Lee Trevino fighting golf did get an LCD game from Tiger Electronics. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Those like handheld LCDs?
Yes, with like the four, like the just several little displays that it could possibly.
It's like a Game & Watch.
Yes, yeah, like a Game & Watch.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's incredible that a golf game got this, but it gives you a directional pad. It gives you a button just for swinging, and it gives you the ability to select a player and choose what kind of sound you want on or not. I think that's enough for me. I'm sold.
I'd buy it.
But that's it for Lee Trevino, and I think we need to instead remember that this is an SNK game, and we don't really like SNK, but we weren't too... I mean, Joe hated this game based on his complaints, but the rest of us, we weren't too down on it. So is SNK
it's
coming
like the
around?
opposite of normal.
I mean, they have proven that they're not going to ruin everything that they touch. Okay,
good call. Joe?
To address your comment there, I wouldn't say I hate it. I actually do think that this is, a decent game from SNK. So, I'm optimistic about them.
And if you want more golf games from SNK, they made Top Players Golf in 1990, which I think made it to the NES. We'll see about that one. I don't have it on the list right now, but I'm sure it did. And then there's also Neo Turf Masters, which came out in 1996. And I don't really, I'm not as hyped on golf as I was back on NES Golf, but wow, the sprite work, the vibe, the everything about this game makes me want to play it. It looks that good for a two-dimensional sprite game. Unfortunately, it's an AES board, and so it's going to cost you about $15,000 if you want to play Neo Turf Masters on a Neo Geo.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, and I'm surprised that so this is just an arcade game though, right?
Well, it did come to the Neo Geo, and they have those giant cartridges, and those are the ones that cost $15,000.
And so they got
I do
screen
know
capture for all of their actual on field. Maybe it's not. Maybe they painted this, but the actual players look way too realistic to be in this game.
I was gonna say I do know that Neo Turf Masters is, or at least once was, available on the Wii Shop channel.
That is true. How do you know that?
I know that from our favorite song, Mike, Update Day by Nirvana, the band, the show.
That's very true. I was going to spoil that because you can also now play it on the Switch for $15. So your choice, $15,000 or $15. You decide. Actually, it's $7.99, so it's even a bigger no-brainer. Sean, I think I'm going to buy this on Switch. What about you?
I'll play it when I come over. When I can come over.
Next year. Yeah,
2022.
Yeah, $15,000 is a lot to pay for a game that isn't stadium events.
True.
I have nothing left to say. Let's get into the essential games list. Joe, I need your vote.
I really want to replay NES Golf. I should have done it before this episode to see now which one I like better. Because on paper, this has added more and improved, but then you have my little pet peeves and everything. Either way, in my memory, I remember enjoying NES Golf more at the time, probably because I had less to compare it to. But either way, I think they're close enough where if NES Golf wasn't essential, I certainly can't make this essential.
Very well said. Sean?
Well, to address Joe's statement, I think that part of the reason that we do this podcast is to rip the mask of nostalgia away from everybody who's older than us' favorite video games and try and actually look at them and see how they play now. And that's why I can't have that kind of nostalgia for NES Golf. And I wasn't even one of the votes to put it on the essential games list. So I
don't think anyone.
No one voted.
Yeah. We all just really liked it.
I'm going to disagree and say that you guys put this on the essential games list. So
I definitely did. I shouldn't say definitely. I'm almost positive did not.
Well, it was an unofficial member, considering you all played it for so long after we reviewed it.
I'm still playing
it. But regardless, I do think that this is a better game than NES Golf. But it's still a golf game, so it's not going on the list. So that's where I stand.
One thing that really bugged me that I didn't talk about in the episode is that in the manual for
We're
NES
still
Golf,
in the episode.
True. I meant, the essential games list is almost
Wait,
like its own episode. And in the manual for NES Golf, they included how far a ball would travel at max power for any individual club, and that helped you figure out where things were going to go. And in this game, they didn't think to include that in the manual. And so for me, this cannot be an essential game. But let me go a little further for a second. Let me go just a little bit further and say that this absolutely is a step in the right direction, both for SNK as a company and in terms of like improving sports games. This is much better in terms of like features and being fleshed out, and even including like, a total of 36 total holes and 2 different modes and a practice mode. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that this is better than NES Golf. But I was introduced to that game at a very
formative time in your life.
Yeah, a formative early time in my life, and 2 years ago, and and I'm just like, I think if you put a gun to my head and tell me I can only keep one of them, I'm gonna think that's a very strange request, but I might choose NES Golf over this, and that says something just about like Nintendo's charm of things. And just how third-party,
Lumpy
developers
Mario. You'd prefer to play as Lumpy Mario than the greatest of all time, Lee Trevino. That's insane.
Yeah, I think I would. And it just goes to show you the barrier for third-party developers that they don't get that Nintendo attachment to them. Like we judge them so much harder than our Nintendo friends. And maybe that's just because we're biased. Maybe it's because Nintendo pays us to run this podcast.
Just going to let that linger.
Very good, very good. That is all the time we have for this episode of Nostalgia. You can join us next time. We'll be playing Milon's Secret Castle.
Sorry, what was that again?
Milon's Secret Castle.
Okay, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting one. It's a action adventure game released by Hudson Soft.
Looking at it now, I really don't like the look of it.
Sean tried to tell me he had never heard of Hudson Soft. They're the ones with the Bumblebee mascot that were then bought by Konami. So you definitely know who I'm talking about. They made Adventure Island, our lost episode.
We never even addressed the lost episode.
I addressed it on Twitter, so I feel like that's where the majority of our fans are, so that's that.
I don't follow us on Twitter.
That's interesting. Are you not the majority of our fans?
I'm not on Twitter.
That's because that episode is lost in the offices of yore, correct?
Correct. And maybe someday, the office, like the Willy Wonka Chocolate Factory, will reopen its gates to children. Maybe someday. Hey, real fast before we end the episode, can I just get, because we always do like a verdict on these games, World Class Track Meet, was that a play it or a skip it?
World Class Track Meet?
Yeah.
That was a skip it for me.
I think I would go skip it.
Yeah, that's a skip it. Adventure Island?
I think that was a skip it for me.
I might have gone play it? I can't remember.
I'm a skip it. Joe, it's not life or death. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to hold you.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank God.
If you can't even remember the game,
I thought you were the guy with the gun to my head.
No, the guy with the gun to your head only asked about golf.
No, but I remember Adventure Island. I just can't remember how much I liked it.
You know what it was? It was Adventure Island Quest, the mobile game that I think is a play it and an essential games list game.
Yeah, you actually picked up like a Nokia N-Gage to play that, right?
For sure. Yes. I also have Tony Hawk.
I've got one more thing to say.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up.
I still have more games.
And that is,
don't worry.
Oh, more games. Oh, okay. Go on. Then I'll do my thing in the post show.
That'd be great. Galaga Demons of Death.
I would say that was a play it, not a skip it.
I think I would say play it as well, especially because I'm not a shmup guy. Just interesting.
Okay. Golgo 13.
I would say play it.
Yeah, it's broken jank, but it's play it.
But it's worth experiencing.
And Jackal?
I'd give that a play it.
Play it.
Wow, you guys are loving these games now.
Yeah. The only one I'm thinking I
play the shit out of that.
I think I might change my answer on Galaga.
To skip it?
to skip it. Yeah, personally, but the rest I'm sticking with.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you guys for that research. Join us in the post show for Joe's soapbox.
And from our audio producer, in quarantine, everything's a play it.
Welcome to the post show. The only thing I wanted to say to clear up is that in Pokemon Red and Blue, all three of Lance's Dragonair know Agility as their only psychic type move. Agility is a status move rather than a damage dealing move. However, these Dragonair, due to the AI, will be locked on Agility against a poison type such as a Zubat. So a Zubat can beat Lance's Dragonairs at a level, at any level, just because they will not attack you. So that's the AI glitch.
Okay, I feel that, but can you explain something to me for a minute?
Sure.
Why does Lance have 3 Dragonites?
Because there just weren't enough dragon type. He has 2 Dragonairs and a Dragonite.
I just think
but
that's insane.
What other dragon types are there? Yeah, it seems like a bad decision to make a dragon trainer if you don't have enough dragon types.
What we're talking about. I thought we were talking about Marauder Shields.
We were talking about Monster Rancher.
That's a game I haven't even heard of in a while. Was that any good?
No.
Monster Rancher?
Worse than Digimon.
Really?
Yeah.
I remember
Monster
I played...
Rancher sounds like a Munster Cheese Ranch Dorito.
I remember I was staying at my cousin's house for a week, during the summer of probably 90-something, and there was a PlayStation 1 game about Digimon, and the only real thing that I remember from that game is that
they would take a shit.
No, I don't remember that, but that they would grow meat out of the ground as if you could just farm meat as if it were a crop.
Yes, Digimon World. I had it as well on the PlayStation. It's now a very rare game. I own it, and it's worth full retail value.
Wow.
But they do poop in that game. I will send you a link.
What's gun to your head? What's better, Digimon World or Red Dead Redemption 2 in terms of animals pooping?
I think I'm gonna have to give this one to Digimon World because Agumon's poop is photorealistic.
All right, Agumon poop.
But it's weird. I feel like it's much weirder because isn't Agumon a character? He's not just an animal. He's got a personality. Right?
I think that's no different than saying isn't it weird that Isn't it weird that Pokemon say their species name in the anime, but in the games they just have animal cries.
Okay, yeah, I'm watching Agumon poop right now, and the thing is that there's a lot of it. I never would have thought that there'd be that much. Why does he keep doing that?
All he has to do is just go to the bathroom, too. If you just let him go to the bathroom in the outhouse, then you won't have to worry about the poop going anywhere.
But wouldn't this relieve his need to use the bathroom instead of continuing to poop until he goes to the bathroom? It seems that he's pooping in protest.
Right. Apparently, Digimon is good.